Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at the EcoHitch Trailer Hitch receiver on a 2017 Subaru WRX. Now you may be wondering where the hitch is, and that's the cool thing. This knockout panel can be removed with a trim tool, and it will reveal your hitch receiver. It is a Class 3 2-inch by 2-inch receiver. Now because it is so hidden, it is a little bit more difficult to access. I would actually leave this lower trim fastener off if you plan on using it regularly to make it a little bit easier. Doing that will also make it easier to remove and replace the knockout panel and to insert the 5/8 pin and clip. Now one does not come with the hitch, but you can pick one up here at eTrailer. Our safety chain loops are here on the bottom, and they accept a standard S-hook or even a larger clevis style hook. You want to make sure if you have a bike rack or cargo carrier that stows in the vertical position that it's going to clear and be able to utilize that function. So measuring from the center of our hitch pin hole to the furthest point of our bumper, we're looking at 3 inches. So I really don't worry too much that you're not going to have any issues with it going up. So you're good there. Just keep in mind you're probably going to block your license plate. But I do like the fact that the ground clearance on this is fairly high. So from the top of the receiver tube opening to the ground, it's coming in at 16 inches, which is really good for a sedan like this. And also, it's really beneficial to have it up a little bit higher than the exhaust, because when you have your bike rack or whatever it may be, your exhaust is going to be lower than that. Whereas a normal hitch that'd be a little bit down below your rear diffuser is probably going to be right in the way of the exhaust. So if you're getting rowdy on those back roads, anything that you will have attached to it is probably going to get soot, where this one might actually prevent some of that. So that's a nice little added benefit to that clean look as well. Now the downside maybe to this hitch versus some of the other ones is going to be the installation. It's not terribly hard to do. It is a little bit cumbersome. The fascia is going to be removed. The exhaust will need to be dropped down just off the muffler isolators, but overall none of it's terribly hard to do. If you're somewhat mechanical, you'll be able to knock this out. I'd give yourself maybe a good half a day or a good long afternoon to knock it out, and you're probably going to want an extra set of hands to help you with the fascia and also to raise the hitch up, but I think it's totally worth it. I mean, if I had an option like this for my car, or a lot of my friends that have, enthusiast cars, they would go with something like this, but you really don't have that option for a lot of different vehicles. So the fact that you get a 2-inch hitch with decent capacity and a really clean look, this makes it a no-brainer, at least in my eyes, if you own a WRX. So if you're installing this yourself, follow along. I'll walk you through all the steps. That way you can get your hitch installed. Now, if you watch the video and determine it might not be something that you want to tackle, maybe you don't have the space to do it, the place to do it, or even the tools or want to do it, you can reach out to our dealer network locator to find someone close to you to get the hitch installed by a trusted individual, and then you don't even have to worry about it, and you can enjoy all the usability of your hitch. Now, to begin our installation, we're going to be removing quite a bit inside to get our fascia removed. This is a really good time if you are doing wiring along with your hitch to be doing the wiring at the same time, because a lot of the panels that we're be gaining access to are going to be the same ones that you'll need to take off to do your wiring, so might as well knock it out in one go. With our trunk open, we're going to remove our cargo mat. Now we need to remove the threshold, which is going to be this plastic, and it's going to be 3 points of attachment. So we have a plastic push pin that's located here, and this may be aftermarket. I'm not really sure, but it looks like there's this snap here, and ours are bolted in with a 7mm socket to get this bolt removed. So we'll go ahead and get those taken out. And throughout all of this installation of the hitch, I recommend having a nice organized spot to keep everything. There's going to be a decent amount of clips coming off, and it's nice to have them ready to go for reinstallation. So make sure you have those kept in a safe spot. And for the plastic push pin, it's kind of recessed here, but I have a trim panel tool, and my goal is to just kind of wedge behind it and pop it out. Flathead screwdriver is also an acceptable tool, and there should be a separate bottom piece to that plastic push pin, so just make sure you get both pieces. And the threshold should pop out fairly easily, so just kind of reach underneath it and then pull it up, and there will be a series of clips along here that it snaps in. So once you have that popped out, we can set it aside. We're going to be pulling back the carpet to gain access to where our taillights are located, and to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to remove our foam pieces. And we're going to head over to where our cargo net was attached. You may have this attachment. It should just twist out. And as I peel this back, there are more plastic push pins if you want to remove them. There's one located here as well as up top, and then also one in the back. So if you want to completely open this up and make it easier on yourself, go ahead and get those removed. And with that cargo net hook taken out and two of the plastic push pins towards the rear of the vehicle, this is enough to where we can just kind of get this out of the way. I am going to remove our foam cover here as well. And you'll see we have plenty of access to peel this back. Now we need to remove both of our taillights. So the first thing you're going to want to do is unplug the harness. And so at the top there's just a push button. You'll push that down and then you'll be able to separate that. There's also this plastic clip that goes onto one of the studs. We're going to be removing the nut on the studs. So if you need to, use your trim panel tool, just pry that off. And the nuts that we have on the taillight studs are going to require an 8mm socket, so go ahead and get those taken down. And these are really tiny, so just be careful. Now to get your taillight removed, sometimes these can be adhered a little bit better than others just over time, you know, things build up in there. But I found instead of trying to pull or wedge anything, you can push in, there's that big opening where our plug was located, and if you push that straight back, that'll help loosen it up. And you'll see that the alignment tab is located on this side. So when pulling it out, you need to make sure that you go straight back. With this removed, we'll go ahead and repeat the same steps on the other side. Now you need to head to each of your wheel wells where the bumper is here on the back side, and you'll find there may be two plastic push pins. We don't have them on either lower side. At the top though, we do have it where it meets the rear quarter. And these are a little bit different than a typical plastic push pin. You press in on the center. I'm just using a Torx bit, but really anything that's a small screwdriver, you just push that in, and then you should be able to get that pried out. You can use that trim tool, but we'll get these removed on both sides. Now underneath, there's going to be just a series of plastic push pins that just go along the outside edge. So you'll see we have 3 of them located here, we have 2 of them in the center, and then another 3 on the other side. So we'll go ahead and get those taken out. And the last hardware that we need to remove for our fascia is going to be located right underneath where our taillights were. It's going to be a 10mm socket on each side to remove that. Now we're getting ready to remove our fascia, so set up a place that's safe to have it stored for a bit while we get the hitch installed. And something that we're going to do is put a little painter's tape along the bumper edge as well as the rear quarter edge, because as we pull this out, we don't want the clear coat to be rubbing against each other, cause any scratches long term. So this not only helps for taking the fascia off and protecting it, but also when we put it back on. And to remove the fascia, it's pretty easy. It's just going to be a series of clips along the edge that's here, but also along the center portion. So I have Sam helping me today, and I do recommend having an extra set of hands, so that way you can have hands all on the bumper and have it supported. But to pop it out, super easy. Just grab on the back side and just put light pressure and just work your way down. And there's also, they kind of snap into this portion here, so just kind of peel that back. On these tabs, if you need to, you can lift up. But once you kind of get those, removed and you have both sides pulled back, the center section sometimes can be tough on Subarus. They're pretty strong clips, so I recommend grabbing on the bottom diffuser area and then just kind of wiggle it back and forth while pulling back. And we should get that to separate. So you can see those clips along here. So just wiggling it a little bit should be enough. Now, normally we need to look for electrical connections so we don't, pull on them, but I don't see any. Depending on your trim level, you may. If that's the case, just detach that plug and then you can set your fascia aside. To get our bumper impact beam removed, we're going to need a 15mm socket, and you're going to want an extension, or you can get away using a wrench. But there's going to be 3 bolts that we're going to tackle. actually 3 points of attachment. So we have a bolt here, a bolt that's located up here, which you can access through the hole in the impact beam. So that's where that extension comes into play. And then there's also a nut that's going to be on a stud, but that's also a 15. So we'll go ahead, we'll get all of those removed on both sides, and then we can take our bumper beam off. The nuts that are on the stud, just kind of leave those slightly on. That way it's not falling off as you're trying to remove it. And then once you have everything good to go, we can just take our bumper beam and set this aside. Now we're going to need to lower down our exhaust, and something that you're going to want to do is support the exhaust, because once we take it off the isolators, it's going to want to free hang, and we don't want the exhaust to get damaged in the process. So since we're on a lift, I'm going to be using a cam buckle strap to just create a cradle underneath, but you can use a block of wood or a box or really anything just to support that once we lower it down. And to remove the isolators on the exhaust, sometimes it helps to spray a little bit of penetrating oil or even soapy water, but use the hanger as a pry with a long flathead or pry bar. You just simply push back, and these are flexible, so you really don't have to worry too much about them ripping. Just take your time, and you should be able to get this to pop off. So there's one located right at the end of the muffler, and then also as you go back towards the outside of the vehicle, you're going to see another one. Now we need to remove our heat shields on each side. There's going to be 4 bolts holding them in place. So with a 10mm socket, we'll get those removed. With our heat shields out of the way, we can fish wire our hardware into the forwardmost holes. That's going to be our spacer, our star washer, and our bolt. Our rearmost holes, we can just drop the hardware in place. You can kind of feed that through the frame rail if you need to. Now we trim out our heat shields to fit around our forward bolts. So it's a fairly small portion that you'll have to cut out. You can use really any cutting method. A pair of tin snips works really well here, but if you have a Dremel or something along those lines, that will also work. Now you can put your heat shield back in place, and we're just going to be using the 2 outside bolts. Now with an extra set of hands, we're going to get this in place, and I recommend having just 1 nut on each side. Now this isn't the final product of what we're going to put up there, but it's going to make it a lot easier to have the hitch at least up in place. So our main goal is to get it in position without pushing any of the bolts into the frame rail. So we'll just slide this portion in, and you may have to kind of move your mufflers around to be able to do that. Now when raising up also, you're going to have these portions that bolted into the fascia. Just make sure you're going over that, and be careful not to push any of the bolts back into the frame. But as I mentioned, what I'm going to do to make this easier on us is just get the nuts started on each side, just one of them, and that way the hitch will support itself, and then we can do the proper hardware in place. So once we have it up in place, we're going to be bolting it up. It is rather cumbersome, but here on the front, I'm just kind of supporting this on one side, but we'll be putting 2 flat washers, and then we'll have a split washer, and then the nut. So I'm doing this front one because I can push down on the frame rail as that nut wants to draw in, and then as we tighten this one, we'll be able to drop that stud through the hitch on the back side, making it a lot easier. But again, just a few threads here to get it started so it'll hold it in place. So once you have that, we'll just repeat the same hardware process on the remaining hardware. With the hardware loosely in place, at this point, they want you to put the bumper beam back on loosely and then also the fascia and mock it up. And I see what they're trying to do. It's a fairly small hole that we're going to be having this go through on the fascia. The thing that I'm not a huge fan of is to be able to torque these down. It seems feasible because you can get to it, but the problem is, as you can tell, as I try to tighten this down, it's going to be spinning the bolt around, and that doesn't make me feel very confident, and I'd rather not take the fascia off. So I'm going to torque it down while it's already here. And the reason they say to keep it loose, obviously, is for adjustment. Side to side, there's really not a whole lot. And as far as up and down, I think once I tighten it down, there's not a whole lot of up and down movement. So I'm pretty sure we should be okay by torquing it down now. It's kind of up to you, but I've found that this might be the better option, and it's gonna make it a little bit easier on us. So before I torque them down, I'm gonna tighten these and just snug them so they start to draw up with a 3/4 inch socket. And that's kind of the key when it comes to getting these started without having to use a wrench up top is gonna be speed. So an impact or something along those lines to really draw this up will get it started and make it easier with the torque wrench. So I determined with the electric ratchet that I used, that snugged it down enough to where those bolt heads aren't going to move with a torque wrench. So before I torque it down, I will get everything back in, because once we see where that opening is, if we need to draw it up a little, we still have that ability. But the main thing is making sure that you have those snugged down before you get everything back up. You don't want to have to go back and undo everything just to get those to stop spinning. So I'm happy right now with it. We're going to get our bumper beam put back on. So with the bumper beam loosely up, you're going to see pretty quickly it's a tight tolerance, and obviously it's not tightened up. But as we put this up, just make sure that you're kind of pushing that beam up, obviously to where it's not rubbing against the hardware, but at least to where you can get the opening of a shank to go in here without this bumper beam making contact. Now our center knockout, where our hitch is going to live, this just has some tabs that we can push in to get this removed here. So just pushing on the top portion, once you push those tabs in, this just simply drops out. And we are going to need to trim a little bit of our plastic for the hitch to be able to slide through. What I'm going to use is painter's tape, and it really just, you want to leave that notch for it to snap into. But really, if you go just above that, we're going to be cutting out this portion right here. So I'll be using an oscillating tool. If you have a Dremel or something along those lines, that's also going to work well. We'll go ahead and get this cut out. With that trimmed out, we're going to mock this up by getting our fascia put back in place. And you can kind of just lightly snap this all in, and we're going to take a look at how that hitch is sitting. Now with this mocked up, I snapped it in, and it's just about perfect. Now I do expect that as you put stuff in, the main thing is this top portion is clear. You can slide those in, and everything looks pretty good here. So I'm actually pretty impressed with this. So as far as fit and finish, it's pretty spot on here. I am going to take a file to these edges just to make it look a little bit cleaner, even though that cover is going to go back in place when you're not using your hitch, but now's a good time to do it. So at this point in time, we can get our fascia put back in place in the reverse order that we took it out. We can also get our interior panels, and we can get that all going, and then we'll come back, get our exhaust, and torque down all of our bolts. Now with everything back in place, I'll come back with a 3/4 inch socket, and using the torque settings found in the instruction manual, we're going to torque down our bolts. Now with our exhaust back in place, we're all set. Now is a look and installation of the EcoHitch 2-inch trailer receiver on a 2017 Subaru WRX.